Good afternoon. My name is David Swinford with the 2nd Company Georgia Artillery and lately with the 8th Pennsylvania. We're out here today. We're going to discuss a few different types of cannon that we have available for our unit. The first one being a 3-pound field piece. This is a field piece. You notice it has tall wheels. It isn't one of the naval trucks or the garrison trucks that you see inside of fortifications. It's designed to accompany a battalion of infantry on the march. 3-pound guns and 6-pound guns were considered battalion guns, and they were the heavy support for a battalion of infantry. This gun is an iron piece. It is a 3-pound tube, weighs about 350 pounds. The rest of the gun comprising of the carriage is just called a Congreve carriage. Congreve style was a British style. It contained 2 side boxes and a trail box. The one side box was full of canister rounds and powder and charges already pre-made. The other box were strapped and saboed round ball solid shot with pre-made cartridges on top. The back trail box would have ropes, additional fuses, a port fire, an elevation device, and a triangulation square. This gun would be normally pulled along on a dirt road or a path, would have the tompion in place and tied on so debris wouldn't get into the barrel. In addition to that, it had a belt on the back that covered up the vent field and the vent, so junk wouldn't get in the vent. Today we have more problems with insects because they sit around a lot, and if you leave it out, mud daubers will fill the thing in. So the vent belt and pick have a good place to keep things out of the barrel. The iron tube consists of many parts. The front of the barrel is called the muzzle. You have a muzzle swell, you see how it swells up. A muzzle ring. This tapered section here is called the chase. Then you have a ring and ogee, the first reinforce, another ring, and then the second reinforce. This whole area in the back is called the breech. In the very back is called the cascable with the rope loop, and there's on the very back is a rounded piece called the button. On top here, this flat area is called the vent field, and the actual hole in the top that leads down to the combustion chamber is called the vent. Now, to fire this gun, you'd have to roll it into position, and ideally you'd have 12 men on the gun. 6 men to be pulling it with ropes, 6 men that handled the equipment and fired the gun. You'd have a front gunner, there was a sponge man, a worm man, a linstock man on this side, and a gunner that maintained the vent field over here. In the back, you'd have someone on the on the box, and the powder box, which would be your powder monkey, and you'd have an NCO in charge of the gun itself, its placement and its use. That's 6 men. Now, to fire the weapon, the first thing you have to do is using what's known as the worm, looks like a giant corkscrew, goes down the barrel, searches the piece, brings out any remaining pieces of the last cartridge fired. Cartridges in the time period were made of linen, wool, sometimes even thin leather. Leather and all those sorts of things are combustible, and when the charge goes off, they wouldn't necessarily all burn up. You have to fish the pieces out. Next thing you'd have to do is advance the worm. You put the worm down, or the sponge, excuse me, sponge in the water, spin out the extra, and run it down the bore to cool the pieces. Let it get a little bit cool, bring it out, and you're going to have the gunner on the back with his thumb over the vent, creates a bit of a partial vacuum and puts out any potential sparks that might remain. Then you advance your cartridge, your powder, your shot, ram it to the back, and the gunner is told to prick and prime. He uses a gimlet made of brass, go down through the vent and break the cartridge open. Remember what I told you, it was a solid cylinder. You're breaking it open and making it accessible to either your fuse or loose powder. Now the fuses were called quills. They were made of goose quills, and it's placed in here like so. And then an order was given to make ready. Everyone came off the gun by about 1 foot and watched their respective angles. The gunner here is the linstock man, and when he was told to give fire, he brought the burning rope, the linstock, down on top of the fuse. Poof, and it goes. It's instantaneous. It's not a Bugs Bunny fuse. It doesn't sit there and sizzle and go down. It flashes and it goes off. At least ideal. Unless you have something like rain or fog that would make the thing wet and damp, and then it would be a problem. This gun is called a 3-pound gun, not because the gun weighed 3 pounds, I already told you about the weight of the tube, but because the projectile itself weighed 3 pounds. The solid round ball, once down here, it fires out with an elevation of 3.5 degrees. This gun was capable of throwing a shot 990 yards, almost 1,000 yards. So you're talking a half a mile. Now, at a time period when the average soldier's musket had an effective range of 100 yards or less, that meant you could engage your enemy at extreme range. Then if he was able to advance closer, say he got within 250 yards, you would be ideally switching over to a cartridge that was called a canister round. It's basically a can that has 50 musket cartridge balls in it. Now that turns this weapon into a giant shotgun at close range. Very effective anti-infantry. This gun, as it sat, was probably the best gun for the frontier. It was effective, very strong. It still had enough power to bash through palisade walls, but it was light and small enough and narrow enough to move on the Indian trail type paths that you had in the Western theater, and even in most of the Eastern theater, roads were very poor. So we have the 3-pound field piece Grendel.